Hello my lovelies, and welcome to my second video of a three-part series about the Downfall of Númenor. How did Sauron really cause the downfall of Númenor? Did he come to Númenor and influence its kings even before he gets captured? Is he the shadow that befalls Númenor in early days? Let's explore in this video. Hello my lovelies, and welcome to the Clueless Fangirl YouTube channel. I create content like this, lore videos, live streams and podcasts on Lord of the Ring, or rather Tolkien's works, on a weekly basis. If you want to follow me on social media, all links are in the description of this video. Enjoy! Sauron came to Númenor as a captive of the 25th and actually last king of Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn the Golden, in the year 3262 Second Age. This is what the text tells us, but I always wondered what really went down in Númenor. From the year he was captured, actually let's not call it captured, as my theory is this was his plan all along, but more on that later. So from 3262 till the downfall of Númenor in the year 3319, Sauron went from being a prisoner to priest to the advisor of the king. All that in around 50 years. Not bad if you ask me, considering the long lifespans and lack of events for centuries in Arda. So this is the time span we know Sauron was in Númenor. But I always wondered if this was the only time Sauron actually came to Númenor. And I started to do some research on the history of Númenor and found Tolkien mentioning events that did not match the otherwise blissful description of the blessed island of the kings of men. And I'm not talking about the time span around the downfall. I'm talking about Númenor's early days. Those days that actually should not be tainted by evil, or rather Sauron. So what is my theory here on the downfall? I do believe Sauron came to Númenor way before he was captured, at least one time. I actually think it was twice, and I will go through the timeline with you to point out certain events and text passages that could underline my theories. Some of the events are the same I mentioned in my first video on the Númenor series, on who the Witch King of Angmar really is, or rather who he was before he became the Witch King. So if you haven't watched that, go and check it out. The three videos on Númenor will all be connected to each other. Okay, so let's look at my chart I made on the line of the kings of Númenor, and let's start with the year between 740 and 1075, the time of the 5th and 6th king of Númenor, Tar-Melendur and Tar-Aldarion, his son. We don't know of a real family feud in the line of Elros and his successors till this time. Yes, there was a question of succession, as the 5th king had two elder sisters. The eldest was Silmarien, the queen that never was. And as the Númenorians at that time preferred a male heir, the crown went instead of the eldest child, Silmarien, to her younger brother, the later king Tar-Meneldor. Nothing special so far, and not unheard of even in our world. Oftentimes women could only rule if they were the only child of a monarch, and not even then. So she joined by marrying Elatan, the house and the line of the lords of Andúnie, who later would become the Faithful. This is the house and line of Elendil, and later even Aragorn. And with her brother and nephew, the family of the kings became estranged for the first time. How? The king's son Aldarion was most like his forefather Eärendil, the mariner, one of the glorious figures from the First Age, and he rather sailed the sea than stayed at home and aided his father in ruling the kingdom. He became a great mariner, founded settlements in Middle-earth, became friends with Gil-galad, Círdan and even Galadriel, but he cared more for the fate of Middle-earth than his own kingdom, it seemed. So far so good. This I do think was still quite harmless. And yes, we could theorize even at this point if Sauron had his hand in the dealings with the question of succession. But actually I do not think that. Let's take a closer look at both kings, though, as there are two events in particular I find important. During one of his voyages, Aldarion encountered storms and almost drowned with his ship. We never heard of that before because Ulmo and other Valar protected the waters from the Númenóreans as they did aid in bringing down Morgoth, the enemy of the ages before the Second Age. So why did this happen? And doesn't it remind you of the drowning of the last king who tried to sail west? But Aldarion did not try to reach Valinor. He was on his way to Harad. Still, a bit weird, Tolkien specifically mentions this, and the explanation of Aldarion's father that he gave was his son brought the wrath of the Valar upon them, as he opposed his father many times and refused to stay back in Númenor. So far so good, no mentioning of Sauron here. It is worth mentioning another falling out occurred, and the story is beautifully told in the tale of Aldarion and Eärendis, the mariner's wife, in the Unfinished Tales. It is the story of the later King Aldarion and his wife Eärendis, which laid the foundations of many years of mistrust in this family. And it sounds as if a shadow did fall upon the family at this point of time. But still, I'm not convinced Sauron had actually a hand in this. But what I must admit is that the seed of mistrust of especially women of this family, being suspicious of men and actually low-hate them, was planted at the time of these two kings. If you want to know more about the beautiful but actually very sad tale of the mariner's wife, let me know in the comments. The story has always been one of my favorite ones in Tolkien's Legendarium. The second event I spoke of was in 869, when Aldarion learned from Gil-galad that a shadow returned to Middle-earth and a servant of Morgoth rose in power. Keep in mind the term shadow for now. And undoubtedly this was Sauron they were speaking of. Still, I do not think Sauron had been to Númenor this far. But this will change soon, as he must have learned of the power and strength of the Númenóreans. And my theory is he wanted to put a hold to the growing influence of the Númenóreans in Middle-earth, his dominion. But he knew he could not fight the elves and the Númenóreans together, as they still had a very strong alliance. So what better plan could there be than breaking up this alliance as well as dismantle the kingdom of men from inside? The time Sauron learned and probably saw the growing power and influence of the kings of men had not only in their own land but also their growing presence and dominion in Middle-earth, he must have started to plan their downfall. And one last fact on this time that it is important. The sixth king, Tar Aldarion, only had one daughter, and so they could actually change the law, or they had to change the law of succession, so she could inherit the throne. So let's skip a bit ahead, as nothing important happened in Númenor for a while. We continue with the second queen of Númenor and her time of ruling, as during this time Sauron actually is mentioned in the text. She sent out an army, well actually her nephew who ruled in her name during her last years as a monarch and later became her heir, Tar Minastir, did send the army to Middle-earth to defeat Sauron and aid their allies, the elves of Eregion. His son, and also later king Tar-Kiryatan, was the commander of this army. And now let's look at the text. He defeated him. Sauron was said to have fled Eregion. So he didn't bring him as a prisoner back to Númenor like his descendant Ar-Pharazôn would do many centuries later. But he stayed in Middle-earth for a while and did not return immediately. Now imagine the heir to the future king, quite young, but a victorious great warrior of men, and his army of Númenóreans celebrating and exploring the riches and beauty of Middle-earth. And now imagine the defeated Sauron with 9 rings, or at least some rings. He might have given a few away already. He did forge them 200 years ago. I told you before, he knew he could not defeat the allies at this point in time. But why not make your enemy your friend? He was a shapeshifter, and we know he also wanted to recruit an army of great men to become the ring-wraiths and basically his slaves. So what greater man than a future king and great warrior could you find? Again, I made a whole video on my theory Kiryatan is the Witch King, and we do not need to go into great details here. But what is important, Sauron was a shapeshifter and disguised as either an elf or a Númenórean or a powerful man of Middle-earth. He must have gained Kiryatan's trust and gave him the ring, and therefore sealed his doom and actually the doom of Númenor. We know from this time on the Númenóreans became greedy, obsessed with power. They went from being teachers to masters, and they wanted dominion over Middle-earth. And isn't that exactly what Sauron stood for and what the power of the ring was supposed to be? It corrupted the prince slowly, but this was not all Sauron had planned. It wasn't enough to make him a ring-wraith. Sauron wanted to destroy Númenor, and what better way to do it from within, or let them destroy themselves? So my theory is he accompanied the prince back to Númenor, and there is proof in the text. Kiryatan came back to Númenor around the year 1800 or a bit earlier. Around this time, Tolkien writes, the shadow fell on Númenor. And who is often referred to as the shadow? Correct, Sauron himself. So obviously this could mean Kiryatan returning with a ring sealed the doom, and that was the shadow that fell on the blessed island. I'm convinced though it was Sauron that came to Númenor with him, because a lot of very strange things happened after his return. But let's take a step back and mention Isilmo and his son Tar-Minastir, the 11th king of Númenor. Isilmo died around 1731, so before Kiryatan returned with Sauron. And I'm convinced Isilmo was one of the other ring-wraiths, not the Witch King though. We don't hear of a shadow, but we do know that Minastir, although he was a good king, envied the elves. Envied the elves? Where did that come from? The elves had always been friends and allies with the men of Númenor, and they never questioned their mortality till Minastir. So how, or better, who whispered in his ear that the gift of men actually was not a gift? Because I do not think the envy was anything else. He didn't envy their lands or power or wealth. He had all that himself. So what else could he envy? Right, their immortality. And now remember what Sauron whispered in Ar-Pharazôn's ear centuries later, the exact same thing. I'm not opposed to the theory that Sauron was in Númenor even before he came with Kiryatan, and he stayed to seed mistrust and envy, and while he was there he either made Isilmo, the unlucky prince that never became king, or his son, or both, to ring-wraiths. So there we have it. He was in Númenor at least once, I believe even twice, before he was captured, and he started his cunning plan of the downfall early on. And from the inside, it was an inside job, and that's a really bad joke, I know. He spread the word of the unfair treatment of the race of men, and made them question the Valar and their authority. I do not think he was there the whole time though. He had to take care of his dealings in Middle-earth as well. But ships sailed frequently during that time from and to Númenor, and it would have been easy for Sauron to have traveled there and back again. See what I did there? During the time of Tar-Ankalimon, the 14th king of Númenor, things got worse. And again, I do not know if Sauron came back himself or his plan just unfolded. So who was Tar Ankalimon? He was the 14th king and the grandson of Tar Kiryatan, who I believe became the Witch King. He ruled from 2221, although I do believe it actually was 2251, the year the ring-wraiths showed up for the first time and either his grandfather or father became the Witch King. Tolkien did give conflicting dates in various manuscripts on this year and who took the scepter that year. The people of Númenor became even more divided. They stopped using the elven tongue and they neglected the worship of Eru. And the custom of giving, for example, the first fruit. Another very interesting fact is the passage that the eagles who lived in Númenor for centuries left during his reign. So that is a symbol for the Valar losing hope in the Númenorians, as they were there to actually protect them. Tar Ankalimon also became obsessed with immortality. We know that his father was called the Unwilling, which means he was the first king that was unwilling to die. But this was more than that, and it was not only the king that was obsessed with immortality, it spread throughout Númenor. The people also started to focus more and more on their own pleasures and the accumulation of wealth, which for me sounds something Sauron would approve of, and again, maybe he was that for a while. We know of the power of speech and how important that is in Tolkien's world, and especially these changes in the Númenorian society do hint that Sauron might have been in Númenor during this time and fueled the ongoing rumors and encouraged them to forsake Eru, which could match with his later plan of making the Númenorians worship Melkor instead of Eru. Again, I have no real proof, but don't you agree all these facts hint that he was there and influenced the king and the whole nation? Let's skip forward again and come to the 20th king, Ar-Adunkor, who reigned from 2899 till 2962. Oh my god, all these dates. Maybe I should mention before, if you haven't already seen this, although the king and the population became more and more obsessed with immortality, their lifespans actually grew shorter and shorter. You can see that in the time the kings actually ruled. So what could be the explanation? The Valar and the favor and gift of the Valar left Númenor slowly? So let's take a look at the king and his time of reign. And one thing might stand out, the prefix Ar. Why Ar and not Tar? He changed his royal name fully to an Anduniac name. So he no longer used the elvish title of all Númenorian kings who came before him. And the meaning of his name was basically a slap in the face of the Valar. It means Lord of the West. But the Valar were the lords of the West. The faithful who were opposing the king's men thought this was blasphemy. The king also banished elven ships to set sail to Númenor, as he did banish the elven language fully. But things got even worse during the time of the 23rd king of Númenor, Argimilsar, who fully forbade elves to enter Númenor. He called them the spies of the Valar. He neglected the care of the White Tree, the symbol of the undying lands. The worship of Eru was completely abandoned, and he oppressed the line of the faithful. He even forced them to leave their homes in Andúnie and settle in Romena, where he could kind of monitor them. It really seems to me the king got more and more obsessed with the hate of the Valar and the elves. And as the question of God in general, and again, who else did feed these thoughts? Sauron, correct. At this point of time, those ideas were common knowledge and part of the daily life in Númenor. So I do not even think it was necessary anymore for Sauron to even come to Númenor to gaslight anyone. The fire was already out of control at this point. This changed though with the new king, the 24th king of Númenor, Tar Palantir. The name alone tells us what he believed in, and that at least he tried to get Númenor back in the graces of the Valar. Unfortunately, it was too late, as Tolkien says. His mother was of the line of the faithful. Actually, a lot of kings did marry into the line of Silmarien. So they basically were all related, although not that close. And from his mother, he learned of the Valar, to worship Eru and so on, basically get Númenor back on track. But he had a younger brother that rather shared the beliefs of his father and the Kingsmen, and he was opposed by the Kingsmen, which was bizarre because he was the king. So a kind of civil war broke out in Númenor for a while. Unfortunately, the king had only one daughter, Miriel, and after his death, his nephew took the throne and Miriel as his wife. He was no other than the last king of Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn the Golden. What a name, if you ask me. And if you know Tolkien, you know that the marriage of close relatives, he was the son of Tar-Palantir's younger brother, and therefore the couple were first cousins, never has a happy end. It is also important to say that she was forced to marry him, and the marriage was definitely not a happy one. It is important to know that Pharazôn was in Middle-earth during the rule of Tar-Palantir, and waged war with the free people of Middle-earth over land and dominion. And that was around the time of 3243 Second Age. Around this time, Sauron must have second-guessed his plan to bring down Númenor. A new king was on the throne with Palantir, and at least it looked like the Númenorians were back to being the faithful race of men they once were. So all his cunning plans and his influence over the chosen race of men seemed in danger at this point. So what to do? How to take back the power? Well, let's take a look at what happened next. After the king's death and Pharazôn usurping the throne by marrying the rightful heir Miriel, word got to him that Sauron proclaimed himself king of all men. Well, you can imagine that did not sit well with Ar-Pharazôn, who claimed that title for himself. And finally, in 3261, he sailed with an armada to Middle-earth to capture the self-proclaimed king. We know how strong Sauron's forces were. Yes, the Númenorians were mighty warriors and they had an armada. But come on, Sauron defeated that easily? It took the last alliance years to overthrow Sauron, and that only happened because he lost the ring. So how could Ar-Pharazôn win this easy? In my opinion, he didn't, and that was the new plan of Sauron. To come to Númenor openly and continue to plot the downfall from within. I really see no other explanation here. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Sauron went from prisoner to priest to advisor in no time basically. And how and why? Because I do believe he knew Númenor. He has been there before at least 2 times, and he is the shadow that Tolkien mentioned in the early days of Númenor. So this is my theory. Let's summarize it. I think he might have been there during the time of the 5th and 6th king, Tar-Melendur and Tar-Andarion. I'm convinced he was there during the time of the 11th till the 13th king, Tar-Minastir, Tar-Kiryatan and Tar-Antanamir. He even made them ring-wraiths and one of them the Witch King. He might have been there during the time of the 14th king, Tar-Ankalimon, and the 20th, Tar-Adonkor. Oh my god, all these names. Here I'm also not convinced, but it's possible. And well, at the end of Númenor, we know he was there as a prisoner, and he might have influenced the last king either while in Middle-earth or he came to Númenor to make sure the line of succession went from the faithful back to the kingsmen. It is not really important how many times he came to Númenor to corrupt the once mighty kingdom, but rather I'm convinced he is the personification of the shadow Tolkien keeps mentioning, and he was there before the text says he actually was, and that the downfall was planned by Sauron long ahead. Because just like Ar-Pharazôn, Sauron did not tolerate other kings next to him, and he was afraid of the growing power of men of the West. So it's just logical, in my opinion, he fought them with everything he had, and that was way more than his armies in Middle-earth. This is the second video of a 3-part series of the Downfall of Númenor. My third and last video will be about the downfall in general and explore the lines of kings and the heritage a bit deeper. I hope you enjoyed my theory so far. Thank you for listening. And I'd love if you leave a comment so we can discuss your opinions and theories here. Bye bye, my lovelies. Take care.